Hey Domainers, welcome back to Game Domain. I'm Marcelo and today we're going to be talking about the Mario & Luigi series. Again! This time we're going to rank all the Mario & Luigi Dream Team bosses, and if this video gets a lot of support, we'll do it game by game. We're going to start off the series with the fourth installment of the Mario & Luigi series, Dream Team. This game was the first 3D Mario & Luigi game, and I think the way they transitioned the series was done very well. This game's main mechanic is the difference between the real world and the dream world. In the real world, both Mario and Luigi fight alongside each other. They also use bros attacks. In the dream world, Mario is transported into Luigi's dreams and battles by himself, buffed up by Dreamy Luigi. This also lets him use Luiginary attacks, and allows for enemies to appear in hordes. There's also giant battles, which work like the giant battles from Inside Story, but with less screaming into your DS microphone and more actual skill. Now, this game also has X-bosses, which are harder versions of previous bosses. However, these would just waste your time. They would be ranked right next to their original versions because, well, they're just the same boss again but harder. I'd rather save you guys the time. With all that out of the way, let's start the ranking from worst to best. 26th. The tutorial boss. Maybe I shouldn't include tutorial bosses, but they do pretty much count. As we do know, this is Phantasma, which makes it a pretty interesting fight, I guess. Still, it's a tutorial boss, and it has no difficulty. This makes it the worst boss in the game. 25th, Smoldergeist. While this isn't exactly a tutorial boss, it's just really boring in my opinion. You don't even get hammers yet, and all you can do is jump. It's not even a tutorial boss, yet you can't hammer or use bros attacks. This just makes it a really boring boss fight that just feels like filler. And in my opinion, the beginning of Dream Team already has enough filler for one playthrough, as the game was drowning in tutorials. 24th, Grobot. This is the first fight where the game actually just lets you have fun instead of babying you the whole time. And now you actually have access to interesting moves, albeit it's just the red and green shell attacks. However, Grobot is incredibly easy. None of its attacks are hard to dodge, and even if you do get hit by one, it does barely any damage to you unless you're severely underleveled. But I doubt that you are because of all the annoying mandatory fights in the early game of Dream Team. It's not as boring as the Smoldergeist or the tutorial Phantasma battle, but it's just a cakewalk. 23rd, Sorrow Fist. Okay, this game just really doesn't make sense to me. The win condition for this fight, like all the fights with the Hoorahs have, is just to have only excellent attacks. If you get anything below excellent, the referee heals Sorrow Fist fully. And you know why this doesn't make sense? Sorrow Fist, the skinniest member of the Hoorahs, has the most health out of all of them, which basically means you're required to use Luiginary attacks if you don't want to suffer for, like, 10 minutes jumping on his head. And normally I'd be okay with this, but my 3DS has a terrible gyroscope, so I had to keep using Luiginary stack, and I'm terrible at Luiginary stack. This is really just personal bias, but this fight is one of those fights that just pisses me off. It's not even that difficult, it's just irritating to lose all your progress because of one tiny mistake. 22nd, Robo Drill Digger. This isn't a bad fight by any means, honestly. I just don't really care for it. The giant battles in this game are absolutely amazing, and this one isn't too bad either. Sadly, it's more of a tutorial giant battle than anything, and it's basically impossible to lose while also being relatively boring. Certainly not bad though, and a nice change of pace from the other bosses in the game. 21st, Dreamy Mario. This boss is where, in my opinion, the game starts to become more fun. Sure, you only have access to the jump button, and I did just criticize another boss for only letting you jump. However, the difference between Dreamy Mario and Smoldergeist is that Dreamy Mario is a fun boss. The attacks aren't bland, you're fighting another mysterious entity that turns out to be Phantasma later on, and you're fighting yourself. There's like 20 Marios on the screen at once. It's not a great fight, but it's really where the game's fights become interesting. 20th, Thunder Sass. The craziest hoorah, Thunder Sass. I think is a fun fight, though it can honestly be over in 2 turns if you do it right. Sadly, I don't think this idea is exactly original. The secret boss at the end of Partners in Time, Shrowser, did exactly this idea, except slightly harder and with much more stakes. And also, Shrowser takes a while to kill. Thunder Sass can die in about 2 turns if you counter him well. This fight isn't bad, it's just uninspired and way too easy. 19th, Kamek 1. And here starts the Kamek March. You fight Kamek 3 times in this game, all in the same area of the game. Thankfully though, the fights ended up being pretty decent. The first of the 3 fights, Kamek 1, isn't bad or good. It's just a basic Kamek fight. 18th, Kamek 2. Basically the same thing as the last Kamek fight, but I like this Kamek's Drybone Swarm attack, so it ranked higher. 17th, Corkscrew. This fight is pretty fun, honestly. Corkscrew isn't particularly difficult, but you do get another Bros attack to destroy it with, and it has some fun attacks. In my opinion, this is where the bosses started being quality all the time. Sure, I still have my nitpicks, but from this point onward, all the bosses are good. 16th, Earthquake. This fight isn't half bad. My main issue with Earthquake is just that it feels like they re-spirited the Tower of Yik from BIS, put it in 3D, and called it a day. This fight is incredibly similar to the Tower of Yik, and because of it, it just feels like I'm fighting the Tower of Yik again. It's not really a bad thing, since the Tower of Yik fight from BIS was actually really good, but it does feel pretty uninspired. 15th, Fly Guy Are Thieves. This is probably the most forgettable boss fight in the Mario & Luigi franchise. Not to say that's bad though. I enjoyed this fight, and while it was relatively easy, the broad access to several Bros attacks and multiple targets to hit made it a pretty fun fight despite its forgettable nature and low difficulty. 14th, Heavy Zest. Back to the Hoorahs, Heavy Zest is probably the most basic of all of them. Just win in 3 turns. His relatively low HP makes this possible if you time your attacks well, and even though I'm pretty bad at Luiginary stack, it wasn't too hard to destroy him. He's a relatively basic fight, but pretty fun too. I don't really have anything negative to say. 13th, Beef Cloud. The best hoorah besides Big Massive himself, Beef Cloud. I think this one isn't too hard, but it's really fun. It's less about dealing damage and for some reason more so about just being quick in menus and with your attacks before he heals himself. This brought a different fight style to the series that was never seen before, and it was really fun for that reason. 12th, Mamoshka. This fight is the final fight where the creature you're fighting is just some random creature that comes out of nowhere and gets really angry at you. I noticed that a lot of the early bosses in Mario & Luigi games are like this. However, this boss has really fun attacks to dodge, and that ends up being a great experience for the player because of the intermediate difficulty and access to multiple Bros attacks, making it a pretty fun fight. 11th, Mount Pajamaja. You heard me right. Mario & Luigi went from fighting candy-obsessed mushrooms to fighting entire mountains. This fight is the second giant battle in the game, but it's a great second battle. I wouldn't say it's hard, but it's really fun, like all the other giant battles, and has some new elements to spruce it up. I appreciate the fact that Alpha Dream gave us everything we wanted in giant battles, fighting entire mountains. 10th, Bowser and Antasma. Starting off the top 10 bosses, we have the first Bowser fight of the game, and also the first time you fight Antasma while knowing it's Antasma. This boss is relatively difficult depending on your skill levels in grinding, but it's pretty fun. Though I think the main reason I struggled was because of my horrible gyroscope fucking up Luiginary Ball. 9th, Z-Keeper. This boss was nearly perfect. The giant battles in this game are amazing, but this boss was on the path to greatness. In the end though, the beginning of his fight was just tedious and annoying, and grabbing his legs and pulling him down was just boring and dragged down the fight with it. However, the rest of the fight was great. 8th, Big Massive. Big Massive is the leader of the Hoorahs in the Dream World. This fight is relatively fun and makes for a good conclusion to the first visit of Dreamy Wakeport. This fight is moderately difficult, but his attacks are fun to dodge, and you have some fun attacks to use as well, making this fight a top tier 1. 7th, Wiggler and Popple. Yes, I know, it's another Wiggler boss. However, I really do enjoy this game's Wiggler fight because, well, you know, Popple's there too. Popple's a pretty fun recurring character, and I'm glad to see him. Sure, this fight is really easy, but it's fun seeing Popple again, and you have a good amount of Bros attacks to make the fight more entertaining. 6th, Final Kamek. Okay, so the other 2 Kamek fights were way up on the list. Why is this one good? Well, it's honestly just amazing. It's difficult, fun, intriguing, and provides one of the best generic Kamek fights the Mario franchise has ever seen. He can split himself into copies, create a giant broom to attack you with, and more. It's such a fun fight, and it's challenging too. 5th, Palladium. This fight is so weird. Somnom Woods is a really fun area in my opinion, but this fight is just, in my opinion, the weirdest part of the area. This comes at a weird point in the story, but Palladium still has a bunch of hard attacks to dodge. It's a really hard boss in my opinion, but you have a bunch of fun attacks to use on it as well, making it super fun as a later boss in the game. 4th, Elite Trio. I really love this fight. It's so unique. Fighting the Elite Trio definitely isn't a new concept, but the way this fight goes about it is super fun and entertaining. The Elite Trio have a ton of personality and are super fun to watch argue. They also have a bunch of super cool attacks to dodge, and the only way to win is by KOing all three of the Elite Trio at once. It's a super cool concept for a boss, and it was carried out very well. Taking the bronze medal of the bosses in the game, third, Giant Bowser. This fight is so good for so many reasons. For one, you're fighting Giant Bowser as Giant Luigi, and just one game ago you were Giant Bowser. It's like fighting yourself, but it makes sense. It's like the two titans of giant battles just squaring off against each other in one amazing cinematic showdown. All the counters and attacks look like they're from a blockbuster film. It's like Godzilla vs. King Kong. This fight is so entertaining, fairly difficult, and incredibly fun. I love it. Taking the silver medal, second, Dreamy Bowser. I know it's cheap to have Dreamy Bowser so high up. He's the final boss, but honestly, I really like Bowser in this game. Not as much as I do in Bowser's Inside Story, but Bowser in Dream Team, while being a recycled villain, is threatening. Bowser is actually smart. He betrays Phantasma, steals the Dream Stone, and is more powerful than ever before. And that shows in this fight. It may not be the most difficult fight, but it's the culmination of Bowser learning all game how to be a truly threatening villain. And hell, it's the final boss. All the attacks are fun as hell, you have every Bros attack in the game, and his attacks are fun to dodge as well. What an amazing fight. And if you haven't already figured it out by now, the number one, the gold medal taker, the cream of the crop. First is Phantasma. Phantasma is an example of why Alpha Dream was such a beloved developer. They made amazing one-off characters for their games. Cackletta, Fawful, who came back later, but I digress, the Shroobs, Queen Bean, and Phantasma. And let me tell you, this guy is threatening. Sure, maybe a purple bat isn't threatening, but if you've played the game, you know. And now he's back! What's he gonna do this time? He teams up with Bowser, powers him up, and at the end, he gets betrayed. Bowser leaves him for his own goals, and so Phantasma attempts to finish the job. It is amazing. He snatches you and brings you into the dream world, and then he somehow manages to be a blend of difficult, entertaining, and the final boss of everything you've learned in Dream World combat. Hell, he even takes Dreaming Luigi from you and puts him in a glowing orb, and if you're not careful, he literally eats him. What the hell? Why is there vor in an Alpha Dream game? I didn't think I'd have to say that working here. All jokes aside though, this boss is the culmination of everything the Dream World was and is. Phantasma was a great character, and this fight was a great end to his arc throughout the game. Well, that was our list. Remember, these are our opinions, so please just try to be respectful if you disagree to others. However, let us know what you think in the comments. We'd love to see your opinions. Anyway, this has been Marcelo with Game Domain. See you next time.